The most dangerous hacker usually does not begin with code. They begin with a person, a tired employee, a rushed contractor, a help desk worker trying to clear a queue, a finance manager trying to close the day, a user staring at a screen full of junk email, then answering a call from someone who sounds calm, familiar, and useful. That pattern is not theory anymore. Verizon's 2025 DBIR says human involvement remains high across breaches, with major overlap between social engineering and credential abuse. Microsoft, Okta, and Google have all documented recent intrusions where the first real weakness was not the firewall. It was trust. That is why the title matters. The most dangerous hacker does not invade systems, they invade people, because modern organizations have spent years hardening the visible perimeter while leaving something softer behind it. Identity, routine, support processes, exceptions, recovery flows, urgency, politeness, and institutional trust. A machine does not care if you sound convincing. A person does. And once a person inside the system acts on your words, the system often opens itself. The old popular image of hacking was technical and cinematic, a hooded figure, green text, a race against encryption and firewalls. But the documented reality is colder. In Verizon's 2005 report, credential abuse was one of the leading initial attack vectors. Social engineering continues to feed that pipeline, not because people are stupid, but because modern work is built on constant interruption, constant authentication, and constant requests to verify, approve, reset, respond. And trust, the dangerous actor is often not the one who can break the hardest system. It is the one who can make the right person open the right door. That is also why social engineering scales so well. It does not require defeating every control directly. It only requires finding where the organization has delegated judgment to humans, help desks, identity teams, vendor support, payroll, HR, finance, executive assistants, third-party contractors. Every mature company has built recovery paths for when people lose phones, forget passwords, change devices, travel, escalate access, or need urgent support. Those recovery paths exist for a reason. But they are also where persuasion becomes more valuable than malware. Look at the pattern around support channels. Okta disclosed a consistent set of attacks against US-based customers, in which threat actors targeted IT service desk personnel and tried to get MFA factors reset on highly privileged accounts. Google's reporting on UNC 3944 described similar behavior, calling service desks, claiming a new phone, pushing for MFA resets, then using that access to move deeper into cloud environments. The point here is not just that a support workflow was abused. It is that the attacker did not need to beat identity infrastructure head-on. They needed a human being to treat a malicious request as routine. That makes this kind of actor more dangerous than the stereotype. A system intrusion is visible to security teams as a technical event. A human intrusion often arrives disguised as normal business. A password reset, a voice call, a ticket, an approval request, a follow-up from IT, a quick fix for a problem the attacker may have helped create in the first place. Microsoft documented Storm 1811 using voice phishing and Quick Assist in 2024, including impersonating tech support and later using Teams messages and calls that presented as help desk or IT support. By the time the victim understands what is happening, the attacker may already be operating through legitimate tools and legitimate trust channels. That is why the human target is rarely chosen at random. The most effective social engineering is researched. It studies workflow, language, pressure points, and who is most likely to approve an exception. Google described UNC 3944's extensive research on victims and its high success rate. Okta described attacks focused specifically on highly privileged roles. These campaigns are not just persuasive in a generic sense. They are organizationally literate. They understand who can authorize change, who is overloaded, who is reachable, and which parts of the institution have been taught to value speed over friction. That also explains why the real target is often not the system administrator, but the process around the administrator. Not the vault, but the person who can reset the lock. Not the executive, but the assistant. Not the bank, but the employee who can approve the transfer. The FBI's IC3 has spent years documenting how business email compromise frequently works, through social engineering or account compromise to trigger unauthorized fund movements. Between October 2013 and December 2233, IC3 recorded more than 305,000 BEC incidents worldwide, tied to over $55 billion in exposed losses. That is not a story about brilliant code. It is a story about trust, redirected under pressure. And the damage is not limited to giant enterprise breaches. It extends into ordinary institutions that still depend on small human moments, verifying an identity, answering a call, honoring a payment request, following a support script. IC3's 2024 report shows older Americans reporting major losses across phishing, tech support, government impersonation, and BEC-related crime categories, with BEC losses for 60-plus complainants alone reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. The emotional register is different from ransomware headlines, but the structure is the same. The attacker wins by entering the victim's decision-making loop before the victim recognizes the decision as security critical. The casino sector gave the public a particularly clear glimpse of this logic in 2023. Caesars disclosed that suspicious activity in its IT network resulted from a social engineering attack on an outsourced IT support vendor. The customer-facing operations continued, but the company also disclosed that personal data from its loyalty database had been acquired. Public reporting around the broader period made clear that some of the most disruptive intrusions in that year were not driven by exotic 0 days. They were driven by access gained through people, vendors, and support relationships. That third-party angle matters because it widens the battlefield. Verizon said third-party involvement in breaches doubled to 30% in the 2025 DBIR. The attacker no longer has to persuade your employee if they can persuade someone who supports your employee, authenticates your employee, outsources your recovery flow, or processes your data. The dangerous hacker is not always trying to penetrate the strongest wall. They are tracing the organization until they find the softest human dependency that still leads inward. The breach, in other words, is often organizational before it becomes technical. What makes this especially effective is that the institution itself helps produce the vulnerability. Companies train people to be responsive, helpful, fast, collaborative, and available. Help desks are measured on resolution time. Finance teams are measured on throughput. Managers are rewarded for minimizing delay. Support channels exist to remove friction. Social engineering works by weaponizing those values. It turns professionalism into access. It takes the language of compliance, support, and urgency and uses it as a delivery mechanism. That is why a security program can be technically mature and still lose to a believable voice at the right moment. The dangerous part is not just initial access, it is what trust does after access is granted. Once an attacker is inside through legitimate identity flows, the system may read their presence as normal. Google described UNC 3944. Using access to enumerate remote connection requirements and look for internal help guides and documentation. Okta described attackers abusing legitimate federation features after compromising privileged accounts. Again, the pattern is the same. When a person is socially engineered first, the attacker can inherit the organization's own permissions, pathways, and internal logic. At that point, the system is no longer simply being attacked from the outside. It is being used from within. This is why the phrase human error is often too shallow. It suggests a careless click. What many of these cases actually show is adversarial pressure applied to human trust systems. Attackers flood inboxes, create nuisance, manufacture urgency, impersonate authority, exploit recovery channels, and lean on roles that were designed to solve problems quickly. Microsoft's reporting on Storm 1811 described spam flooding followed by calls that offered help with the very problem the attacker had amplified. That is not just deception, it is workflow hijacking. The attacker inserts themselves into the victim's normal search for relief. And once you see that, the title becomes even darker. The most dangerous hacker does not invade people because people are easier than systems in some simplistic sense. They invade people because people sit at the junction between security and business continuity. People can authorize exceptions. People can waive friction. People can solve a problem faster than policy. In a real organization, someone always has the power to make the process move again. Social engineering targets that power. It is less about tricking one individual than about identifying who inside the institution can temporarily outrank the institution itself. That is why the defender's problem is not only awareness, it is architecture. CISA continues to emphasize phishing-resistant MFA because compromised credentials remain a major path to malicious activity, but the broader lesson is structural. Any workflow that relies on remote identity recovery, human override, or exception handling becomes part of the attack surface. The system is only as strong as the most trusted shortcut built into it. And modern organizations depend on shortcuts more than they like to admit, because shortcuts are often what make large systems usable in the first place. So the real threat model is not a lone genius battering a digital fortress. It is a patient actor studying where your institution confuses familiarity with legitimacy. A support pattern, a vendor dependency, a finance routine, a reset flow, an overloaded employee, a culture that equates speed with competence. Those are not cinematic weaknesses, they are ordinary ones, which is exactly why they are dangerous. The hacker who invades systems can be slowed by patching, segmentation, and detection. The hacker who invades people enters through something harder to firewall, the routines that make organizations function. And that is the uncomfortable conclusion. The most dangerous hacker is not necessarily the one with the rarest exploit. It is the one who understands that every institution is made of human beings trying to keep work moving. Every ticket answered quickly, every exception granted, every call returned, every urgent message handled in good faith. All of that keeps the organization alive. It also creates the opening. That is why the breach so often begins before the malware, before the ransom note, before the data theft, before the headlines. It begins the moment a person inside the system starts treating the attacker as part of the system.